week on Fridays, my political team and I will talk about politics, what's happening throughout the state of Illinois from an insider's perspective, and we've decided to give you access to it. So for the first time ever, you're going to get to hear and see what we talk about in our Friday conversations. We're calling this the smoke-filled room because in politics, it's in that back room, that smoke-filled room, where decisions are made, where information is shared, and we're giving you access for the first time to that smoke-filled room. We're going to jump right into it. For this first week is our inaugural session. We're going to do this one live in person as a group. It's kind of fun being together with everybody. In future weeks, you might see us in different locations. Maybe we're doing it over Zoom. We figured for this first week that we'd all come together for it. The very first topic we have to cover is a pretty big one. We're a week later than we wanted to talk about this. We had a big old conversation last Friday that I wish we could get people access to because it was, 30 minutes of a doozy conversation. But for those who don't know, there was a failed coup at the state party just this past weekend. So let's get an update on what happened, and then we'll talk about what it means and all that. Oliver, I know you were tracking this pretty closely. What happened with this?
All right, so I know you always tell us don't give free political advice. I'm going to start our podcast with free political advice. If you're planning on taking over a political organization and telegraphing that plan to the media and all the politicos, maybe you should actually have the votes to be successful. What happened this weekend is that there are a few folks on State Central Committee that telegraphed to pretty much everyone, we're pissed off, we're going to take over the Illinois GOP. They got in the room, they didn't have the votes. I know Butler was actually there with me, and he talked to some folks in the room and kind of had a bit more of the play-by-play. So Butler, why don't you tell me what you heard?
Yeah, it was interesting. They motioned pretty early in the meeting and to go into executive session. So most of the conversations happened behind closed doors. But there's a lot of dissension, I would say, and a lot of aggravation with how things have gone the past couple of election cycles. But there's a lot. People have different ideas of why that's happening. There's not really a consensus, and I think that's why ultimately it wasn't successful, because nobody can agree on what the problems are, and if you can't agree with what the problems, then how can you come to a consensus on a solution? And I think that's where we're at.
I mean, somebody did the math. I don't know if it was you, Chris, or if it was you, Michael, but someone did the math and figured out that the cap of what they had, the support they had, was 40%. Who did that math?
That was me. I did some very rough math based on the State Central Committee, the congressional districts, and based on my knowledge of the different factions within the Republican Party in this state, I really only saw them topping out at about 40%. And they needed, 60% to actually make this happen. And I just did not see them having the votes for my math, and that seems what happened on Saturday.
We've seen this dance a few times, right? I mean, we have a fairly inept party, unfortunately, that we have to deal with. It's no surprise to anyone. And you'd think it'd be common sense. Don't go and try to enact a coup if you don't have the votes. And yet, they still went in, they never had the votes, and then they still cast the votes. And only 3 voted to remove Tracy at the end of it, which was, what was it, 3 at the end they voted, or was it more?
I don't have the exact.
They updated it was 6 total. Right? Someone said it was 3, but it actually was 6. They never had the votes, and if you've got political know-how, it's not the way you play that.
I also talked to a couple people in the room, and when they're asked, okay, what's your solution to all these problems, then it was just dead stares. They actually had no plan coming into the meeting. I think they thought they were just going to say, well, we're upset, and they were just going to be like, okay.
Well, we talked about this last week. We had a great conversation about what is the problem. Is the problem the leader, or is the problem the party?
Yeah.
If the problem's the leader, then you should make a change in the leader. And I'm not here to sit here and defend Don Tracy. I'm not going to say that he's Reince Priebus. I also don't think he's awful, but is the problem Don Tracy, or if you had a better chairman, would they change anything? Is the problem the party itself? And I think we could have a bit of a preview of what that conversation was, or a recap of what that conversation was, and what is the problem? Is it the chairman, that we need a better chairman, and that's no disrespect to Tracy, or is it the party itself? And it doesn't matter who you put as chairman, we're still going to have the same structural problems. What do you guys think? I'll pass it to you guys because you haven't had a chance to talk yet.
Yeah, I think, it lends itself to the structural problems within the party. If you read Politico today, you saw that the Democrats have hired, numerous new staffers. And, here in Illinois, we only have 2 staffers who are full-time. We're going to be outsourcing our comms position to a new company. So, no matter who's chairman, they're going to be working with a very limited party infrastructure. And until we address the problems to expand our party and, have the operations to compete statewide and the resources that we need, whoever's chairman is going to be at a distinct disadvantage.
Yeah, and what we see, the Democrats are crowing about the fact that they're going to have the largest operation in state history. Meanwhile, we have 2 full-time employees, I think it is, right? And I train in other states. I work with some of the state party leaders in different states throughout the country, and this is by far the smallest operation that I've ever dealt with, whether blue state, red state, or anything in between. And it's, we can all complain that our party isn't very strong, but how much can you ask 2 people and a chairman to pull off? Like, is it really fair to them? I know they're working their butts off, and they're friends, and would we love to see more out of our state party? Hell yes, but can 2 people do that, especially in a state that they're already up against?
Well, I think we're all assuming is that the people who were doing this coup d'etat actually even wanted to solve the problem in the first place. And I'll give the devil their due. You said, Abby, that if you're going to do something like this, you need to make sure that you have the votes, otherwise it wouldn't be smart politically. But I think that they knew from the start that they couldn't even replace Don Tracy. But what do they get out of this? They get some fame, they get some notoriety. Now, do I disagree with it? Completely. But if you want to stir the pot and you just want to keep shooting upward, I think what they did isn't necessarily the dumbest play.
Well, and certainly there are people, part of that group, who their intention is simply to stir the pot, and that's why they exist. Jason Plummer was the name that was floated as somebody to potentially take over, and Jason isn't my biggest fan, and I'll admit sometimes vice versa, but I will give him credit that he's not that type. Plummer, if he went in on this, it was because he thought he could do a better job. Whereas some of the others, they're just pop stars. That's all they were looking to do. And maybe they took Plummer for a ride on this whole thing as an excuse for them to make some hay and get their name out there, which is unfortunate. But let's talk about where this started. So I'm going to go to you, DeRay, on this, which is what was the impetus for this conversation? Because the excuse for why we were in this situation was Tracy had brought up in previous meetings, one of which you were actually at, the idea of the state party endorsing. And this idea was floated. Apparently there's a committee that exists to look into this.
A long-time committee, actually, from my understanding.
So they've been looking at this idea, and it all comes down to how do we make sure we have the best nominees so we can actually win. And so the party's been floating this idea of doing endorsements. So Matt, I want to start with your thoughts on the topic, and then I've got a follow-up question for you, but go ahead.
Yeah, well, as Abby was saying, this committee has actually been around for, I think it was even months, and the opposition, as we'll call it, just picked now as an opportune time to bring it up because it's a pretty big issue that they can make hell out of. Now, I've seen this personally, political parties choosing to endorse, and at face value it might make sense because it gives some flash to the party, the candidates have to come and kiss the ring, but in Lake County, it's failed repeatedly, and they've tried this both in the 2020 and the 2022 election cycle, and it's left people pretty mad. We've actually had candidates who, because there were no clear lines of what do you need to get the endorsement, candidates were claiming, they're doing backroom deals, or there's actually one candidate who didn't get the endorsement, and he was so mad at how the whole process went down that he went and endorsed the Democrats for the same position that he was running against in the first place. So the problem lies within, one, can you get everyone to agree to even do it, and that's a good idea? And then the even harder question to answer is, how can we all agree on how we're going to implement that? And I think no matter what you do, no one's going to agree on that, because there's a million ways to implement it.
Yeah, well, and there's a lot of structural problems to just the general concept. I mean, we're the party based on the free market, right? I mean, we believe in competition, and yet, for whatever reason, we're constantly looking at primaries as a bad thing. And I understand primaries can be detrimental, but our party believes in competition, and it's our solution to the economy. It's our solution to healthcare, education. We want competition everywhere, but in our party, we want a dictatorship. I don't understand that sort of dichotomy. And there's so many problems to the party making endorsements. Who has thoughts just on that? The party endorsing people.
Well, you have to imagine, what does the party endorsing you get? It might get you discounted postage, and it makes the entire base of this party statewide mad at you because now you're viewed as the establishment rhino. We saw this, they've already basically been endorsing candidates de facto, like we saw last year, 2022's governor's election. They had the slate, they had Richard Irvin, all the powers that be, and the establishment said, this is the guy, you should vote for him, and nobody voted for him, he came in third. So what does if the state party actually took on the endeavor to endorse candidates for for statewide or congressional office, it doesn't actually do them any good. It actually puts the party back further. So this was a bad idea from the start for that reason alone.
And I think on the Democrat side, they have all the reason to do this, and they don't even do it. If they endorse someone, they can throw millions of dollars behind that candidate. They can throw the entire machine against them. They can use all their connections for them. What do you get if a Republican Party endorses you? Access to GOP data center? Like, okay, great. You don't get anything.
Yeah, that's a fair point. And I mean, think about your average Republican primary voter. I mean, this is a party, we preach individualism. We preach free thinking. And so that's our base. That's our party. And so when you come to them and say, so-and-so, the state party chairman or leader has told you you should vote for so-and-so, or billionaire out of Chicago tells you should support Richard Irvin, the average Republican-based voter immediately wants to do the other thing. I mean, I don't know about you guys, but like my mom, we laugh about it now, but like when my parents said, oh, this girl is so sweet, you should like her. I don't care how gorgeous she was. I have no interest in that girl anymore because I'm going to rebel against anything my parents say.
I know, it goes into the free market point you brought up earlier because Republicans and conservatives are by nature anti-authority, anti-authoritarian. So when you have this statewide infrastructure, which we're already skeptical of, come to them and say, this is the person you need to vote for in the primary, we're giving them X amount of resources, they're going to say, no, I'm going to vote for whoever the other person is just to piss you off.
And someone's always going to be mad. I know Bailey won with like 60% of the vote, but there's still a huge chunk of the population that did not vote for Darren Bailey in the primary. And if the state party or any group said you need to just vote for this guy, then you've just disenfranchised a huge group of your supporters. And when Republicans are in the super minority in Illinois, we can't afford to disenfranchise those people. We need to bring everyone together under the big tent.
Yeah, I mean, John, you're running a political race. Would you even want the state party endorsement in many cases? I mean, it's going to cost you votes. Is that something that you would even want for a candidate?
I think it depends. I think candidate quality is, a big issue when it comes to running for re-elections. Saw it at the top of the ticket in 2022 here in Illinois, and we saw it nationwide. I think that, when it comes to primaries, we should just stay out of it. Let's let the candidates run their races, and whoever's the nominee is the nominee. It comes doan to, who are recruiting for office, really kind of relying on operations outside of the state party to recruit quality candidates, run them through the primary, and whoever's the nominee, the state party can take it from there.
Yeah, I mean, I'm beating a dead horse, but I got to ask Butler. I mean, he's our base, right? He's our Republican Party base. If some group of people from a room in Chicago told you you're supposed to support so and so, would you have any interest in that candidate?
I mean, I would say that I would evaluate the candidate like on an individual basis and make a decision.
You would, but in general.
But a lot of people, I think, like if you're a statewide candidate, I would say you probably don't want that endorsement, just because the potential for it backfiring is just so massive.
I mean, that was what the challenge that Irvin ran into was he actually was a decent candidate, but no one really gave him a chance, and his team didn't put him out there. They didn't run a good race, but in terms of like the grassroots, people hated him before even meeting him because they were told they're supposed to support him from a bunch of people who've been poking the base of the party in the eye for a decade. Like this is not a party that's embraced the base or supported the base. So there's some natural skepticism in the base. When the party tells them to do something, they immediately assume that that's bad.
Yeah, anytime I'm like at functions downstate with Butler and I tell them I'm from DuPage County, they just feel like, oh my gosh, like they're not fans of what our politics up here, and I don't think someone, like you said, someone from Chicago telling them what to do is really going to be a productive conversation. So,
by the way, just to clarify, we know that Don Tracy's from Springfield, so
but
the party is considered to be Chicago.
Yeah.
Well, I was going to say, you have that problem from DuPage County. I come from Cook County, so I have to hear, I'm the Rhino.
I mean, that is kind of true, though.
I like that slogan you said. I think we should use that and tell that to the candidates. Embrace the base.
Yeah, I mean,
there we go.
Honestly, I understand. I mean, we'll have I'm sure a future smoke-filled room. We'll have an in-depth conversation about moderns versus conservatives in this state. And I'm happy to give the history of what I've seen over 16 years in politics. But there's a reason why both sides dislike and distrust the other, and I don't blame either side. Cora has always said we're not focused on that battle. We're not focused on that fight. It's just we're we're focused on winning elections. But I can understand why there's skepticism. And so when a party comes in and says you're going to support so-and-so, it just leads to more challenges than it gains. So, I mean, this was a fool's errand from the beginning. And to bring this all full circle, the group who just want to cause problems because they want to be in charge, let's say the Illinois Review crowd, there's a few others, our buddy Del Mar and a few others like to cause problems and get their name out there. He's good at it, he's fun, I get it. They saw their opportunity. It wasn't about this issue, and I think one of you guys said at the meeting, it was like, no, not that. I mean, they didn't have any answers to the problem. We all agree there are problems, but if you're going to run to be the chairman of the party, maybe have a plan.
Yeah.
Maybe have an idea of what you're going to do to solve because we do face problems. We do struggle in this state. So if you want to be the leader, maybe present a plan.
It's an easy target. If you keep fighting the Democrats and they keep outnumbering you, then you got their mind. We'll just switch to an easier target.
Yeah, we can't beat the Democrats, so let's just beat each other. I mean, that's probably the mentality.
It's a testimony to the larger problem with the Illinois GOP is that they are the party of old man yells at cloud. So within their own organization, they have the old man yells at cloud faction.
That's you.
Chris showing us all up by wearing a suit today. All the rest of us look like schmucks.
And my mother told me to dress nice, Colin.
All right.
So wait a minute.
All right, let's go. Make sure we didn't miss anything from the State Central Committee meeting from this last weekend. So Butler, I know you were there. Is there anything else, any other drama we should talk about, or any developments? Maybe some positive developments would be cool from the State Central Committee meeting this past weekend before we move to other topics.
I think I would say I had heard from some of the State Central Committee and Deputy Central Committee members after, and I think ultimately it ended up kind of being a wake-up call to some of them that, hey, we've got to really pound the pavement in our individual congressional districts if we're gonna see some positive changes. That you can't just blame it on the state party and then try to push for changes there, and that's going to fix all of our problems. I mean, I think if we all sat down in a room and put together a list of here are 100 things that the state party could do that would help move the needle or push things in the right direction, I think we could do that. And some of those things would cost money. Some of those things wouldn't cost money. There's coalition building and other things that wouldn't really cost you anything other than your time and the energy that it takes to build those things. So I think that's the positive is that there is a path forward. There's a path to winning statewide offices, but we have to work together to figure that out. And if that's a couple of the State Central Committee members come to that understanding, that's a net positive.
Yeah, I mean, listen, I've used this example for a bit, and I'm not even going to look at Chris when I say this because I just don't want to see his face. But for years, I would say that the Chicago Bears were so bad that you could put Aaron Rodgers on the team and they weren't going to win because they had no foundation, they had no receivers, no linebackers, no offensive line, no defensive line. So you could put who I'm going to admit is one of the best quarterbacks of all time, Aaron Rodgers, one of, yes. And he would have failed because there was no team around him. And so my mentality has been for a long time with the state party chair is you could put a Reince Priebus, who arguably is one of the best state party chairmen that we've had of our generation. You could put him in charge of the state GOP in the state, and he wouldn't get anywhere because we do not have a foundation. We don't have the blocking and tackling. I'm not going to out this Republican organization, but we were talking to a county Republican organization very recently who wanted to run a VDM ED program, which we desperately need as a party. And so we laid out for them the many, many, many work hours it would take to do this. We would need dozens, if not hundreds of volunteers and thousands of man hours. And they didn't want to put in that work. So they ended up going with a consultant who would just say, oh, I'll put on a mailing and we'll call that VDM and EV. And that's the route they went because we are lazy as a party. So it doesn't matter if we have Tracy or a great chairman or a horrible chairman or anybody else. If we don't put the work in, we're never going to win. And right now, the vast majority of our party infrastructure is lazy. Might as well get myself in trouble in the first SFR recording, but am I wrong?
No, you're right. And I have a buddy of mine who's an operative in another political party, and he's
What party would that be?
I don't know, maybe the Libertarians, right? But I have a buddy of mine, And his big thing is that if you want to be an organizer, or you want to be active in a political organization or a movement, all it really requires is 40 man-hours a year to walk your precinct, knock your doors, talk to your voters, and put the work in. And we have so many people in the Republican Party who do not want to put in that work. They want to take the easy way out. And it's sad, but that's part of the reason why the Republican Party is in this position now.
It's been on this path since the Ryan days. People don't realize the way that the party infrastructure has worked for a very long time is you give them jobs via patronage, you give them opportunities, and that's what we had during the George Ryan days. As the party has lost power and lost interest in patronage, we've lost that ability. And so the Democrats, they don't have scruples with patronage, and they have the unions and other entities that are paying their grassroots. Meanwhile, we're asking people to spend time on a Saturday away from their family, away from their jobs, or a weekday to go knock on doors or work their precincts. It's harder when we can't offer that same benefit, that same cash. So we recognize that it is harder for Republicans to engage in the grassroots, but we use that as an excuse. It's why at the end of the last election, we would not allow ourselves or any of our clients or anyone that we worked with to use an excuse for why we lost in 2022. There were a number of reasons why we lost, and we've got a whole study on our website that we worked on for months, and the list is long. It's not just one entity. You can't blame it all on Trump or Bailey or a lack of funding or the runner people, or there's so many different entities you could blame, but here's the thing. Once you blame another entity, you lose your responsibility for fixing the problem. And so for all these people who want to blame the party or blame Don Tracy, I hate that concept, even if it was his fault. I think Michael's point is a valid one, which is if we just spend our time saying someone else is at fault, that's an excuse for us to not get off our lazy asses and get out there and work.
And I think we have a lot of we have pretty diverse state central committee, background wise, business owner, former statewide candidate, state senator, activist. And a lot of them bring a lot of positive things to the table, but I think we've got to figure out a way that, okay, let's get rowing in the same direction and realize that it's not necessarily about who can take credit for what. I think that holds us back sometimes too, is people are like, well, am I going to get credit for solving this problem? Then maybe I won't solve it. It's no, just get the job done. We got a country to save.
Yeah, or a state.
Or a state.
Yeah. That has always been our problem in Illinois politics is even somebody who starts to make an impact, then suddenly they're like, ooh, I get to be famous. I want to be king. And so whether it's chasing that next radio gig, hint, hint, or looking for the next opportunity for them to be famous, instead of saying, we got to make a difference here. It doesn't matter who gets the credit. And that's why I love our team here. This is just the political team. We've got our operations team out there, and everybody works their butts off, and nobody fights for the credit. We give the credit to our clients more than we take it for ourselves. That's how you're going to fix things. So, all right, let's change topics. We've covered this pretty well. John, I'm going to go over to you. We are recording this Thursday late afternoon. It'll be released Friday morning. We are right now in the very end of session. So Illinois Springfield session typically goes till May 31st. This year they tried to set a session close date of May 19th, which was supposed to be tomorrow. And as of right in this moment, we don't know for sure yet, but it looks like there is no way they're going to finish this all by tomorrow. They're going to be back in session next week. There's a tiny chance they could, and we'll know by tomorrow morning when people are listening to this, but we don't know at this exact second. But it's at this point I'm hearing 99% likely they're not going to get done by Friday. So talk about where we're at with session, and let's talk about some of the major things that are up right now, some of the major bills and discussions that are happening.
Yeah, so the last major thing to get done during session is the budget, and procedurally, you need 3 days for first, second, and third reading to pass the budget. At this point, if they wanted to end on Friday, there would have to be a budget bill that is passed out of the Senate, basically today, and theoretically they could pass it at 12:01 on Saturday morning to be done Friday-ish. But that seems really unlikely that's going to happen, so, they're going to have to go back next week. And part of the thing that's holding this up is the fact that, the governor and Democratic legislative leaders really haven't met to discuss the budget because, there's a $1.1 billion sticking point in this budget of, healthcare for undocumented immigrants. And, each side has a different approach to it, and nobody really wants to be the one to, publicly make a play first on how they're going to address this topic. You have Senate Democrats who think that there's already a statute in place for, the governor to deal with the problem and, prevent undocumented immigrants under the age of 65, it is believed, from accessing healthcare and really try to save money by blocking off that 19 to 64 age group from accessing health care. The governor's office disagrees. They think that it's going to have to go through a JCAR ruling, which is the Joint Committee on Administrative Rules, which is made up of members of both parties from the Senate and the House. So nobody's really been able to move forward on this issue, and it's really delaying things further, and it looks like we're going to have to go into next week.
And let's give some clarity on this for those who don't live this, who haven't been paying attention to it. So right now, the state of Illinois provides what is essentially Medicaid coverage for undocumented immigrants. It started at 65 and up, I believe. It has been expanded to now 43 and up.
Yeah, they've been moving throughout the last 2 years to gradually increase it from just 65 and older. Now it's like 44 and older. It should be.
And it's already people, young kids up to 18 are already covered. That was already previously done. So there's two conversations that are happening around this. Number one, that this program just as a whole is becoming more expensive than anybody would have projected. That's not a surprise. You provide free anything to people, they're going to take advantage of it. And then the second conversation is it expanded to people aged 19 to 42? Is it adding even more to the cost of this? So there are two things around providing the healthcare, essentially free healthcare to the undocumented. There are two reasons why this price tag has exploded, and it was a conversation that was going to be difficult weeks ago when we thought we had lots of funding money to play with. The people, Springfield was acting under the assumption the last couple of years that we basically had monopoly money that we could play with, but now the numbers have become real, and a lot of those projections have dropped where now we don't have any money, let alone as much money as people thought. And so now you've got a situation where people got excited about this expansion. They wanted to provide this benefit, especially a lot of progressives, a lot of the Hispanics, the Latino caucus, and now there's just no money. So what do you do?
I think they're all going to have to sit down in a room and hash this out and have to make some tough decisions based on not their own political beliefs, but on the budget. And I think that's where Harmon's trying to go with this. He's trying to make this more of a budgetary issue rather than it is a political issue, because Harmon's not going to go to the people of Oak Park tomorrow and tell them we're not going to provide health care for undocumented immigrants. The people of Oak Park and the people he represents won't tolerate that. But Don Harmon can go to them and say, hey, we don't got the money for this, maybe next year. I think that's what the angle is going to be, but it seems like the governor wants to do this now, probably because of the undocumented refugee crisis in the city of Chicago right now, because he needs a good press day. So all three of them, including Welch, who never gets brought up because it's Welch, it's how it is, I'm sorry, but they're all going to sit down in a room and hash this out in order to figure out a budget, because I don't need to go back to the Rounder days where we don't have a budget for 2 years. However long it was.
And Pritzker won't let that happen, certainly, but I think we all know Springfield doesn't operate unless there's a deadline, and everybody knew that the Friday deadline here, the May 19th deadline, wasn't the real deadline. May 31st is the real deadline. So it's funny, when they pushed this, I remember talking to a buddy of mine down in Springfield, and he's like, yeah, I already have plans to come down after May 19th. There's no way they're going to follow this. Because a lot of these legislators, they're not going to put tough votes on anything unless they have to. So it's not really a shock that, assuming that it continues as it is as of Thursday late afternoon, that they're going to be into next week, and probably maybe even dithering all the way to the 31st, who knows. But this is a challenge, and it's something that we've talked about, which now this is our first time to do this with a public spin on it, which is as the Democratic Party is pulled further and further left, which wasn't a challenge during the Madigan days. I mean, Madigan had complete control over his party and all of Illinois, and he was more of a moderate Democrat. And that played very well in this state because, as we've learned, as our study showed back in late 2022, this is a moderate state. Even the Democratic Party in the state indicates that they're moderate, not progressive, not liberal. And so Madigan was frankly, the perfect leader for the party, because he kept the party more at the center of the road, more centrist. As Madigan's influence has gone, and more progressives and young people are coming into the Democratic Party, they're dragging it further and further left, and it brings an opportunity. Because I can tell you that even though in a Democratic primary, the idea of expanding healthcare to the undocumented is a very popular thing, to the average voter in the state, the polling has shown it's actually not that popular. In fact, even without any spin, it's right on the edge. You spin it, which if you're Republicans and you actually learn how to communicate, you can easily spin this. I mean, this is a state that's among the lowest in the country on investing in mental health services. This is a state that we're struggling investing in high crime areas. We're struggling investing in education. We have higher education. We want to do universal pre-K, universal kindergarten, and yet we haven't identified any way to fund it. We need money for important things in the state, and if you're the Republican Party, you say, hey, Democrats in Springfield decided to give $1.1 billion to healthy 19-year-olds or 25-year-olds who don't have kids, who don't have medical needs, instead of putting it into the medical needs of your senior or your child or your special needs kid. I mean, this is not a difficult thing to spin if we had a state party who knew how to spin anything. And so this puts Democrats in a trick bag, and it's not the first issue that's come up in Springfield, whereas their party gets pulled further and further left, further away from the electorate. It gives us as Republicans an opportunity. We haven't capitalized on it, but it does open up the door.
You know, that's a very interesting point, Colin, because I was following the debate for Senate Bill 1909, which was the Regulation of Crisis Pregnancy Centers bill. And you have the Democrats going up there making impassioned speeches about the rights of women. There was a state representative whose mother died because she couldn't get an abortion in 1972. It was a whole thing. And then the Republicans, it's no energy. Nothing. It's asking questions that don't have answers to them and expecting that's going to move voters or that's going to move votes down in Springfield. So I 100% agree with you, Collin. We need to get better at actually calling out how far the Democratic Party is going on these issues, because certainly they're moving far, far away from the middle with Madigan.
And our polling has shown, I mean, I don't know if you guys have seen this. I'm going to give the domain if anyone wants to see this research that we did, but I have to first remember what it is, so I'll say it at the end of what I'm about to say. But we did research on this to find out what voters in the state thought, and what we heard from them is we asked, which party is more extreme, Democrats or Republicans? And this was right after Pritzker had just spent tens and tens of millions of dollars and other entities to say that Bailey was extreme, that Republicans were extreme. It was a great message, it worked. Even after all that money spent on the Democratic side against Republicans, voters were just as likely to say that Democrats are extreme as Republicans are extreme. The voters in the state don't believe that either party is more or less extreme, and we've never taken advantage of that wide open lane. Democrats in the state have become more and more extreme with Madigan gone as they get to go towards their base. I mean, I loved what Delia Ramirez said when she got elected to Congress, where she said, we just need to nominate more and more progressives. And I said, please do,
Yes.
please do. Because even in her district, she underperformed because Hispanic voters are not progressive. African American voters, as the Democratic Party goes further left to attract suburban white women, they're losing the black base and black vote. You're seeing it in voter turnout because they're not as progressive as a lot of these policies. There's a reason why the Black Caucus in Springfield was one of the more moderate caucuses for the longest time. And so this is an opportunity for us, but we're not. I mean, we have no comms department, we have no comms director for the state party, and the apparatus as it is couldn't put together a sentence with two hands and a flashlight.
And nobody takes the Republican Party seriously. If they tell you something extreme, are you going to listen to them? I think it's an overall branding that the Republican Party would need to take over to actually make them legitimate in the eyes of voters.
And by the way, that research is at 22.corestrategies.com. I had to find it. So 22.corestrategies.com. Look, 20, 30 pages of analysis by this team, by our data people, on what happened in November. There's some great stuff there, so I suggest you check it out. What were we going to say, Oliver?
I was going to say, Chris hinted at this earlier, is that Speaker Welch has become completely irrelevant to the conversation in a lot of ways and has no ability to control his caucus. And I think it provides an opportunity for Republicans to really capitalize on that. But again, as you said, we're just not doing that. We're not taking that opportunity.
You know, all 5 of them down in Springfield, Abby?
Hey, small but mighty. Sort of.
The Mighty Mouse will become the official.
Oh, yes.
I'm old enough that I actually watched those things live, so it's great.
I used to have a Mighty Mouse pen when I was younger. It had like a big, it was a pencil because it had like a big Mighty Mouse.
When was that, like last year? Or?
When I was little, when I was like 5, come on.
A couple years ago.
Yeah.
All right, let's. Any other thoughts on this before we go to the next topic? Any other thoughts on session? Did we cover it all, John? I know there's a few other bills they're talking about. Anything else you want to highlight real quick?
Yeah, I think, just kind of go back to what you were talking about with Speaker Madigan. We saw that, because Democrats have a supermajority in both House, Madigan could keep vulnerable members off votes like this. So, it's really be interesting what Speaker Welch's strategy is on this. Do they try to get it done by that May 31st deadline so he can have some more flexibility with his vote totals? But it sounds like Democratic leadership is going to have to sit down and hash this out.
Yeah, I mean, budget's the big thing. They've punted the Bears legislation to the fall veto session, which will be October, November. So we'll hear negotiations on that over the summer. So it really just seems like it's coming down to the budget at this point, right? So a few other things, but it looks like a lot of it's made it to the governor's desk at this point. So we'll do our best to keep you guys posted. Let's go on to another topic. I'm going to pass it over to my buddy here, Michael. Michael covers central and southern Illinois, big chunks of, 40 some odd counties.
Yeah,
so the dude spends pretty much half his life in the car. But there's been, if you haven't been paying attention, there's been a good amount of drama for, at this point, 6-8 months. There's been rumors that Darren Bailey was going to primary Mike Bost for Congress. There were rumors that Cindy Bailey might primary Jason Plummer for state senate. This has been going around for a while now. Michael, give us just a quick overview of what it is we're even talking about, and then what's the latest, what are you hearing?
Well, the potential for Darren Bailey versus Mike Bost primary honestly probably started before the last election was even over. There were rumors about it and some things kind of happening behind the scenes. We've heard rumors of everything from like polling in the district, like head-to-head matchups. There's been at least 2 or 3 polls that I'm aware of, like some domain names were purchased by, we don't know who purchased them, but they were Bailey adjacent in some capacity because they were Bailey for Congress and those kind of things. And then there's also been this rumor that Cindy Bailey would potentially run against Jason Plummer. It doesn't seem like in the last couple of weeks that the Cindy Bailey versus Jason Plummer matchup is going to materialize. That doesn't seem very likely.
But it does seem like they were at least exploring it, because you were mentioning that if you look at the district boundaries, obviously the Baileys are a hot topic. People want them to come to speak at their Lincoln dinners and what have you, especially in central southern Illinois. And it seemed very convenient that most of the time when it was in Jason Plummer's district, it was Cindy who was going and talking, not Darren. So this, at the very least, it was considered.
It was definitely considered. There was one push poll that was done with some negative questions about Jason, but that's been.
Yeah. And by the way, where are we as a party? We're in this world where suddenly someone thinks Jason Plummer isn't conservative enough. I mean, at that point, you're just desperate for attention if you're looking for a race like that. Because I mean, where are you going to find space on Jason Plummer's right?
Well, part of the motivation, allegedly, is that they would like to have a member of the Freedom Caucus in the Senate, and there's not a current member that is interested or eligible to join, so their only path is to either flip a seat that's held by a Democrat or oust another Republican.
I think it goes back to what we were talking about with everything that happened at the state party level of if you can't beat the Democrat, try and beat the Republican. And Darren Bailey, he tried to beat the Democrat. He couldn't do it. And if he wants a spot, if it's a congressional spot or governor spot, well, maybe not governor spot, but if he wants a position, you can't take it from a Democrat, so you might as well take it from a Republican.
It's just stay relevant, right? I mean, listen, I needled Jason, mostly joking earlier, but Jason's doing a fine job down in Springfield. For those who have their doubts, he's doing a great job in Springfield. He's invested himself in the role. I don't understand. Like maybe with Tracy, going back to the state party, maybe you could complain about a few things. That's fine because he's not perfect like anybody else. But I don't know who has to complain with the job Jason has done. It's not because Jason's not conservative enough. It's not because we think we would do a better job. It's just, hey, we need to stay relevant. So let's go primary someone in our own party.
They don't care. It's just ego.
Yeah.
Well, there's a totally different dynamic in like southern and central Illinois because there's very few Democrat elected officials at all. So if you want to run for office or be an elected official, you either have to wait until somebody vacates a seat, like retires or resigns or whatever, or like primary them. Those are really your only options. So it's, different situation.
What looks like it may be more real is Darren running against Bost for Congress. Talk to us a little bit about that.
Yeah, we're hearing there's some rumors that he's going to make an announcement on his plans in July, so in 2 months or so. Mike's been working hard, traveling the district, and especially those new counties, because he had another 22 counties that were added with the remap. And is putting up very strong fundraising numbers. He raised a little over $400,000 this last quarter, which is a big deal in southern Illinois. So it's going to be interesting to see how it all shakes out. But he had a very strong performance this last election cycle.
Yeah, I shared this last week. So we did our big analysis, which is at that link that I shared. And if you look at the performance, I'm looking at it now, the performance of every congressional candidate, so both Republican and Democrat, if you take out 2 of the districts, you got to take out the districts where Republicans ran crazies, because that didn't play out too well for us, and those districts just don't count because the Democrats way overperformed. But you take those out, Boss was the number 2 performer for both parties. The only person who performed even better was Mike Quigley, so I got a needle my buddy Chris here that had Quigley actually run for mayor. He'd probably be mayor right now, but for whatever reason he didn't, so that didn't happen. But Boss was number 2, and he had no reason to. He did not have a tough election, but he went out there and he hustled, and the numbers show it. The quality of that campaign, the amount that people responded to that campaign was the second highest of any of the campaigns in the entire state of Illinois. And so Boss has been taking this seriously for well over a year.
Yeah, and one thing that Mike has 11 of the 34 counties that he has now, he had previously. So there's only one county that he had before that he doesn't have now. And then also when he served as a state rep in Springfield, there were counties that he represented as a state rep that he never had as a congressman. So there's a lot of high name ID, a lot of familiarity, and it's like very, very positive too.
Yeah. Well, and it's a lot harder to run to Mike Bost's right than it is to run to like an Adam Kinzinger's right or a Rodney Davis's right. I mean, Bost was the state party, one of the state chairmen for Trump's presidential campaign.
Yeah.
I mean, there just isn't a lot of space to
Trump
Bost
came to the district twice. So
Can you imagine if that 400 grand and counting went towards going against the Democrats instead of the Republicans? Like,
imagine what we could do
it's
with that.
insane. It's ridiculous.
I mean, and I'm a big fan of primaries. You heard me say it before, but that's an open primary for an open district. Where we already have somebody in office. Tell me what your problem is with Mike Bost. Tell me what the issue is. He's doing a fine job. Why is that? I know why, but why is that what we're targeting? Let's take out another Republican who's doing a good job, because otherwise, Darren Bailey just has a podcast, and oh look, we have a podcast too. So I understand, like it doesn't make you that special. We're not that special. So like this is Darren Bailey's way to stay relevant, but he's screwing the party in the process.
How close do you think the Dems can get with Darren Bailey as the Republican nominee in the 12th?
Well, and here's the thing. I mean, this is. I mentioned this. Everyone put on your tinfoil hats, but the Pritzker team has proven that they're pretty damn smart. I hate admitting it, but it's true. They're the ones who stoked the flames to get Darren Bailey across the finish line in the primary. I'm not going to put it past them I'm not saying that this is all of them, but stoking the flames here, buying those domains, putting out some of these polls. They've got monopoly money, they got funny money. I'm not going to put it past them to say, let's just put out a poll and accidentally make sure that some of the members of the media are on that poll recipient list and some of the Republican influencers. We've done that before. It's a tried and true strategy where you put out a poll and your audience is 30, 40 people because they don't know you're not actually polling, but it's the ones you want to know, hey, look, there's a poll. So I'm not saying Pritzker's team is doing this, but I'm saying that who benefits from this? It's the Democrats, not the Republicans. And Pritzker's team is smart enough to know that. I would not be shocked if they weren't somehow trying to help fan these flames because it helps them more than it helps us.
And what's Glenn Bouchard doing nowadays? He could run for Congress again.
To that point, there are people that have been on the receiving end of some of these polls that, like, what are the odds they're going to be one of 500 that answers that call? You know, like, it could be rigged.
Yeah, I mean, I think the more the Freedom Caucus and their fights with other Republicans is in the news, the more that hurts Republicans and helps Democrats. I'm not saying that I have any issues with the caucus and their issues themselves. I'm saying the inter-party squabble hurts us, and Democrats know that. So, I mean, listen, I know there have been leaders in both parties whose full-time job, I know a Republican whose full-time job under George Ryan and Jim Edgar. I've known several Democrats whose full-time job was this, where their job is to create dissension on the other side, drive wedges, cause problems on the other side, and it's a smart strategy. I wouldn't be shocked if it's happening here.
Maybe that's why Chris is here. He's trying to
2 years down, you haven't figured it out yet.
Ask some of the Republicans in Will County, they still think he's a plant.
Oh, gosh.
Even though he's one of the few Republicans in the state who's actually won elections in 22.
They
But
stopped calling me that.
yeah, there you go. So once they finally realize you can win. All right. So anything else we need to cover on IL-12, BOST, the Baileys, or we hit this topic pretty well?
I think so. Just stay tuned. We'll see what happens.
Michael will be one of the first to know, so we'll be sharing those updates here. All right, we don't have a ton of time, but we got a couple final topics we're going to cover in our last 10-ish minutes. Chris is our Chicago political expert. You've probably seen him in videos even before today. There's a couple things in Chicago we need to talk about. Number one, Springfield is drawing maps. That's the other thing that actually needs to be done before the deadline. We forgot that. Where they've got to draw maps for the school board, the 20 school districts.
I don't believe they have to do that until June or July.
But it has to be done before the end of June, and they're not going to go back to session when session is closed.
Okay, all right.
So, I mean, unless they have a special session, they're going to have to get this done before session is up.
Well, yeah, go on.
So, ultimately, we're going to need to have new maps for the new elected Chicago board. We are now on draft 2 of these maps, but Chris and our data team actually worked to identify what these maps could look like if you don't take politics into account, which we know the map makers in Springfield are doing, and you just focus on how do we make this fair, how do we just focus on making sure that each of the racial demographics get representation as they should on this board. Chris, tell us a little bit about that exercise and where is this in the process right now?
Oh, so where this started was the difference between different types of data. And it looked like that people down in Springfield, they wanted to draw an elected Chicago school board map that more closely reflected voting age population and census data, whereas many Latino activists within the city of Chicago, they wanted to have a map that exactly reflected Chicago public school data of those people who attend Chicago public schools. Now, Latinos, surprisingly, make up 47% of Chicago public school students. That's a statistic I did not know before I embarked on this endeavor. So that would mean that they're going to get 9 or 10 districts. I don't think that's possible.
Right, and let's be clear. The law is it has to represent the population.
Right.
So that it's a straw man argument. It's a great argument, but it's a straw man argument, and it's one that's worth considering. Is that if more of these kids in these schools are brown, we should have more brown representation on the school board. So it is a great argument. Legally, it doesn't have legs. I want to make sure we make that clear, but it is a great argument. Carry on.
So they started this with, they had 7 African American districts, they had 7 white districts, and I believe they had 6 Latino districts, 5 majority, 1 plurality. The Latinos didn't like that. I in turn drew a map with 7 Latino districts, 7 black districts, 1 white district, 5 white districts, and 1 Asian plurality district by total population. Which is interesting because by the numbers, Asians should have 1 district and they have 1 ward. They
They're 6% of the population of the city of Chicago, so with 20 districts, they ought to have 1 district, and they've not even been brought up in this process.
Oh no, and they don't have the weight down in Springfield to even really make a push. I mean, I don't think Teresa Ma is really causing a stink over this right now.
But
she should be, but she isn't.
Well, so let's talk about this for a second, because this is reflective of how Chicago works, how Springfield works, is you're only going to have representation that your clout decides. It's not about who deserves the representation. It's not about which cause is better or worse. It's who has more clout. And the Black Caucus has more clout than pretty much anybody. And so when you see these maps drawn, whites are a little bit overrepresented, blacks are a little extra overrepresented. And by the way, that is the official demographic term, is blacks. That's why I'm using that term. And Hispanics or Latinos or whatever term you want to use for that, we're way underrepresented. And it shows who has more clout. I mean, with Chewy at the weakest he's been in a long time in politics, Hispanics do have limited clout right now in the state, and you saw that reflected in these maps.
We saw them reflected in the state maps that they passed 2 years ago, and from the ward maps they passed last year, is that Latinos at every turn are getting screwed over in the map making process. Now, they released a new draft 2, 10 o'clock last night. There are now 5 majority Latino districts and 2 plurality Latino districts. So they got to the 7. I was at 7, they got to the 7.
But you were at 7 majority.
No, I had pluralities in there.
Did you?
I had pluralities in there. It's very difficult to make 7 majority Latino areas because they're only densely populated in very specific areas of the city. Whereas white voters are densely populated on the North Shore, the Northwest Side, the South. It's very difficult. But now Latinos have 7 districts, but one of them is only at like 33% plurality, so it's a very, very low percentage of plurality, and Asians are still underrepresented. I think
Zero plurality districts, right? For Asians.
There's nothing for Asians. They don't have plurality on total population. They don't have plurality on voting age population. Nothing.
Yeah.
So the Asians are completely getting screwed over in this map making process. And Latinos, that this might be the compromise they need. It's not the 9 that they wanted apparently from 47% public school students, but this might be something that they're more willing to take. I would expect one more draft to give them a little bit more. They're gonna. I would believe they would try and make one district to be more Latino than just 33% plurality that they have in that one district. That would, if they make another draft, that's what I would expect them to change in it.
So what you're saying is, since they didn't include any Asian districts, even though they should have, the Democrats only care about diversity and equity and inclusion when it only fits their best interest.
Right. And also, it's like what Collin said. It has to do with clout, and because Asians have what, 2 or 3 representatives in Springfield. I don't know if that's not enough to completely derail the map making process on this. Not at least I don't think it is.
Doesn't sound diverse or inclusive to me.
I mean, that's always been the problem, right? I mean, it's about fairness until that fairness in some way hurts them or negatively impacts them, and suddenly they don't care about fairness anymore. And that's why we did this process, was to show, because at the time they were underrepresenting Hispanics, they were underrepresenting Asians. So we did this process just to show it was possible, try to drive the conversation in that direction, because you see this more and more. I think Hispanics are not represented well by the Democratic Party, and especially as you get really progressive Hispanics in office, they are Latinos, Latinas, and they don't represent the desires of actual Hispanic voters. I mean, when we look at the data, one of the things that gives us heart about our Republican Party is that every time we pull the issues and leave party out of it, the number one demographic that moves to the Republican or conservative perspective on issues, when you just make it about the issues, it's Hispanic every single time. We've seen this for years. We saw this during the fair tax, the progressive tax battle. Part of the unwritten story there was that was won by engaging Hispanics. That's part of how we defeated that fair tax, because they were the number one demographic that moved from for to against when they heard more about the tax itself. And so there is an opening here for Hispanics for the Republican Party. We need to get better about talking to them. We need to get better about talking about their issues. Heck, we even need to know how to talk about them here and here. We're calling them Latinos, Latinas, Hispanics. We don't even know how to talk about them. And so there is so much we need to learn to do this. But if we're ever going to be a party with the future, we're not going to do it if we cannot bring Hispanics into the fold. And you saw that Bush did that, George W. when he ran, getting 43% of Hispanic vote. We saw Donald Trump. One of the things he did well was getting a significant percentage of the Hispanic vote in some states, winning the Hispanic vote. That's the path to victory for Republicans. And so we need to run more candidates that look like the Hispanic communities. We need to run more candidates who understand the needs of Hispanic communities. And we as a party need to finally start giving a crap about Hispanic neighborhoods and Hispanic communities. If we do that, we might actually win some elections.
That's a big if. That's a big if.
When?
When?
Republicans having trouble messaging to their potential voters. I'm shocked.
We're breaking news on Smokeful Room today. Real quick, Chris, you watched the Johnson inauguration. Obviously, we watched that race very closely and made that prediction fairly early that Johnson would do way better than anybody else thought he would do. But just quick thoughts on the inauguration before we move to the next topic.
Oh yeah, I watched Johnson's inauguration speech, so you don't have to, because I can't imagine any person in the state who really wanted to watch, especially our demographic. Nobody wanted to watch that speech, but I like torturing myself, so I decided to watch it. You can certainly... Brandon Johnson's not a bad public speaker whatsoever. He is the son of a pastor, and that comes out throughout this speech. And the theme of the speech is the battle for the soul of Chicago. And that's speaking right to his base of supporters. And it speaks even truer to how Brandon Johnson, I mean, we talked on election night how Val screwed the pooch, couldn't get the black votes he needed to beat Brandon Johnson.
Or turn out Hispanic
voters like he should have. But it certainly was a big hump trying to go up against Brandon Johnson, because that is the Chicago he spoke to in this speech. He spoke to his base in this speech. There was only very minimal mentions of other communities in Chicago. When he brought up Hispanics, he brought up Delia Ramirez, and that was his outreach to the Hispanic community during his speech. The really big controversial part was he claimed that the tiers of Adam Toledo's mothers are the same tiers of Officer Preston's mother. Officer Preston was the Chicago cop who was killed, I believe, last week during a robbery off duty. But that's John Catanzaro, the FOP president, is up in arms about that. Many of the more conservative aldermen are up in arms about that statement because it views very tone deaf in a campaign, after a campaign where the number one issue was public safety. And throughout the speech, I can only count about 2 minutes he spent on public safety, and you can tell by his cadence changing that it was a very difficult topic for him to discuss. The rest of the speech flows very well. He's speaking like a preacher, like a pastor, and he's able to get that proper cadence. Whenever public safety is brought up, he slows down a little bit more, or he gets a little sporadic. So you can notice that throughout the speech. So these next 4 years, how Brandon Johnson talks about public safety is going to be the most interesting part of this.
Yeah, and I'll tell you, we've talked about this as a team, but Johnson very well could be Christmas for Republicans. I mean, sure, we would have loved to see a more center-right Democrat in Vallis win that, because that would be best for the city and best for the state. But politically, selfishly, best for us. I mean, we're losing Kim Fox as a fundraising. The term is whipping boy. I know obviously that doesn't really apply very well. But like the Republicans, just like Maxine Waters nationally, both sides want their crazies on the other side. Democrats love Marjorie Taylor Greene because they can raise money off her. They love Mary Miller because they can raise money off her. On our side, it's Maxine Waters, it's Kim Fox, a little bit Lori Lightfoot. And Brandon Johnson, if he actually pursues the far, far left progressive agenda that he thinks swept him into office, when actually that isn't what swept him into office, it could very well be a gift to Republicans if we know how to point to it and say, look at how extreme this is. Again, it's always if.
Yes.
But this could be a gift that keeps on giving. We can raise tons of money and motivate our base on Brandon Johnson for the next 4 years.
But again, we have to rebrand ourselves as the party that's not old man yells at cloud.
Well, there's a lot of ifs in this. There's a lot of ifs.
Republicans taking advantage of an opportunity.
Right. Now, what do you guys think? You guys are quiet over there at the table. Me and Chris are going off on stuff. What do you guys think about this? You think could you raise money in a campaign off Brandon Johnson when he comes off with something crazy? Don't you see you could put that on a text message or an email and raise $5-10 a piece from your list?
People in Lake County and in Northern Cook County, even though the ones that aren't in the city, they were totally all over Lori Lightfoot and I guess now Brandon Johnson. If you mess
Lightfoot was more of a centrist. Like, imagine how much they're going to hate Brandon Johnson.
I remember
the boogeyman.
Yeah, I remember being at election night parties for municipal elections like in Naperville, and people are almost more focused on the election results in the city of Chicago than they were in their own community. So people are really keyed on this, and Brandon Johnson's kind of a target on his back for the next 4 years.
There was a lot of excitement when Lori in Southern Illinois when Lori lost the initial, when didn't make the runoff. People were just like, we're getting rid of her. Like,
yeah, but now you've got a word. It's like when they got rid of Madigan, like we were talking about earlier. It's like, oh, Madigan's gone, guys. Now it's even worse. Yeah. In 4 years, the same way people are going to be talking about, damn, I miss Mike Madigan. The same people are.
No one's going to say that.
People are going to say that.
You're already saying.
You're the only one saying that. You're the only one.
We were just talking about.
You lost a patronage job. You didn't get it. That's why you're mad.
Whoa, buddy, we don't even air my dirty laundry out there, all right? We were having a full conversation. You probably weren't paying attention. You've been quiet over here, buddy. We were having a full conversation earlier about the movement of the Democratic Party away from the center after Mike Madigan. My analogy here is the same way people are going to long for a Democratic Party under Madigan that was more centrist. They're going to be nostalgic about when Lori Lightfoot was mayor because Brandon Johnson's going to be so mad. But two people were too caught up in, oh, Lori's gone, guys. We can celebrate. It's not the end of it's not the end. That wasn't the end goal. Getting rid of Lori Lightfoot.
I actually got Chris a condolences card when Mike Madigan was indicted. I'm so sorry for your loss.
Well, I think the point is, there's opportunities here, and as the Democratic Party goes further and further left, both in their policies and in the people that they put up into office, it opens up opportunities for us. And no matter what term you use for it, scapegoat. What term did you use?
Boogeyman.
Boogeyman. I like boogeyman. I used whipping boy, which is an acceptable term, but some people are going to say Kim Fox being black, that was an artful term. So if you don't like that, I apologize.
Just put it in their head, Collin. They weren't thinking that. Now they're thinking.
Well, I'm just saying.
She looks like a boogeyman. We'll use that.
We're gonna have
Serious.
We're gonna have a trigger warning on this thing, I'm sure, because if someone's gonna get overly sensitive about something. But the boogeyman is there, and I think if we could raise money off Lori Lightfoot, we sure as hell could raise money off Brandon Johnson. If we could raise money off Kim Foxx, listen, we haven't even talked about who's gonna replace Kim Foxx. More than likely, it's not gonna be a centrist. It's gonna be somebody far left who's gonna make us wish Kim Foxx was back. So
Okay, we gotta draw some lines here.
I don't know if that will ever be the case.
all I know is on the Republican side, Kim Foxx has been a gift from God. So
Yeah, except unless you live in Cook County. And,
I live in Cook County. But,
yeah, but you live in the northern part. Like, nothing
Sure.
bad ever happens here. This is the actual
Hey,
suburban.
I got a really nice car. Someone's gonna steal my car in Cook County. I don't say that I don't have to worry
Speak
about
one
crime.
into existence
Come
now.
on. All right, we got just a couple minutes. Let's hit a few topics. We don't love talking about national stuff, but national politics have been brought to our state. And so Ron DeSantis was in Peoria last week. I know John wanted to talk about that. And DeRay wants to talk about Pence starting up a super PAC. So I'll pass it to you two. Let's talk briefly about the national presidential race on the Republican side. John, why don't you kick us off?
Yeah, so Ron DeSantis, presidential campaign in waiting is heating up. He was in Peoria last Friday. His message was really laying the foundation for what his, presidential message is going to look like. It focused, one, on his legislative accomplishments in Florida. He was really trying to paint himself as someone, who's an actual effective governor, trying to compare himself to Trump, who had a, Republican House and Republican Senate, but didn't, get much done policy-wise during those 2 years, trying to make it seem like as president of the United States, I'll be able to effectively govern. And the second one, and the one I think he's really going to be leaning into, is the fact that we can win with under a Ron DeSantis as our nominee for president of the United States. We really focused on during the last couple of cycles, 2018, 2020, 2022. We've been losing, and that's directly calling out Trump's on the top of the party. He's been making endorsements in key states, and those nominees haven't been winning offices. So, I would expect DeSantis to launch, sometime here in the next 2 weeks, because he moved into a new office in Tallahassee, which is probably going to trigger him, to file an FEC Form 1 because he's crossed that $5,000 reporting period. So, he's also seen a super PAC launch endorsements from Iowa legislators and New Hampshire legislators and legislators in the state of Florida. So DeSantis' campaign is really heating up, and this Trump versus DeSantis matchup is, going to be here before we know it officially.
And it could just be not just those two candidates. We know Nikki Haley's in the race. She's my choice. I know she'll never win, but let me at least dream for a little while. You got word that Pence might be making some moves here?
Yeah, some people not affiliated with Pence, or so we think, launched a super PAC last Tuesday. And what you were saying about the path that DeSantis is going down, it's really interesting that just in some of the legislation that he's been signing has been pretty social. It was all about social issues, a lot of LGBT stuff. He went to Israel, signed some stuff there, and I think he's really trying to go the same route that Pence needs to go. Pence has always been the more quiet counterbalance to Trump. He's a
social conservative,
the Christian evangelical. He's going to be quiet. Trump's going to be loud. He's going to attract this section of the Republican Party, and I really think his lane is shrinking more and more as DeSantis kind of crowds that lane. But the problem that Pence has is if he's going to run for president, now is his time. Because he's already not really relevant because he's not the vice president anymore. He's not really doing anything. So if he doesn't run now, I can't see him running in 4 years and thinking that he has a shot.
Yeah.
But I like Pence, but I know he turned off a lot of Trump people because of all the stuff that was going on with January 6th. We don't even need to get into that. But
well, I think let's talk about the path to success, or the path to the number of votes. If you're a Trump supporter, you're going to vote for Trump. If you're not a Trump supporter, you're not going to vote for Trump or Pence. So I think your point is valid that timing is everything in politics. For Pence, it's now or never, so why the heck not just at least give it a try? But I just don't know what path is there because they're either going to vote for Trump or they're not. I don't know who's going to select Pence in that argument. It's either Trump or not Trump or anyone tied closely to Trump.
Well,
right?
if you're the Pence team, you're leaning into the fact that probably the first state is Iowa, where we saw Ted Cruz be successful in 2016 with his evangelical Christian message. So if you're the Pence team, you're going to try to really lean into that message hard and hope you can win Iowa and just kind of build momentum throughout this race and hope that can carry you to the finish line.
Yeah, I mean, we've seen some candidates win that Iowa primary, going back to Santorum, who won that primary and just didn't take it anyway.
didn't they like say that Mitt Romney won it, and then like weeks later they were like, oh, actually it was Rick? Kind of like with Mayor Pete, they can never get the answer. They can never.
Then Ron Paul got the delegates. Ron Paul got the delegates out of Iowa. Never
Right.
forget.
Oh,
Yeah.
Yeah, I think the point is that Iowa's become less and less relevant in this race, which is why we probably should do what the Democrats have done and maybe change it around a little bit, since we shouldn't just always start in Iowa and New Hampshire. But
Well, that's an important. I guess Iowa is an important part of the Republican base, so it makes sense that it would be earlier for us.
early, fine, maybe not always first, but
True.
nice. We'll save that debate for another
Didn't it
day.
used to be Alaska like 30 years ago or something was the first primary or caucus?
I mean, ultimately, I think the path to victory here for us, when we look at the Republican Party, and we're focused on getting conservative, right of center, or Republican, pick your term, candidates elected in this state. There are states where Donald Trump does well for us. There are states where he actually improves our outcomes as a leader of this party, and there are states where he hurts us. And this is a state, whether you like Trump or not, where electorally he hurts us. And so, from our perspective, just again, our focus is on winning elections in this state. Trump at the top of our ticket would be problematic. Because it seems like there's no disagreement in the room.
Well, maybe not in my region, but
I mean,
or Butler's region. But
But that's the thing, is those aren't the areas where we're struggling.
Right.
I mean, we're the south suburbs, working class neighborhoods in the south suburbs is the one place we did well in Chicagoland in 2022. Butler's region we're doing very well in, but we're in the super minority, so clearly that's just not going to win in a state like this. So if we ever want to play in John's or Matt's or Abby's
Yeah.
regions throughout the suburbs, that Trump's going to be a challenge. And every poll that I see right now says Trump's the front runner for the nomination. And sadly, Trump's the nominee, or the front runner to win, even against Joe Biden. So we're talking about 4 years plus in the wilderness where we can't win a single bleeping Republican election in this state if this goes the way that it seems to be going. Again, I'm not picking sides, I'm simply talking about the political realities here. So this national race is one we're definitely going to need to keep an eye on.
That's why we need to support Vivek for president. Everyone
Would
get
be
behind
that
Vivek.
horse string.
I'm more of an RFK Jr.
Like,
myself.
Is that what are you gonna? Is it because Willie Wilson isn't running, so now we're gonna find somebody else?
Hey, is
He's
Bob-
the next Willie
Has
Wilson.
Bob Fioretti announced he's running for president yet?
Oh,
Wait for him.
come on.
Cook County president.
All right, we have reached the end of our time. We have one more topic to get to, but we'll get to it at another smoke-filled room. I want to thank our team, and I'd like to name them by name. So John Jasecki, I'm going to get some of these names wrong. Spelling is hard. John Jasecki, Matt DeRay, Chris Jacobiak, Abby Oliver, Michael Butler. I'm Collin Corbett. Thank you for joining our inaugural session of the Smoke-Filled Room. We're going to be doing this every week, so make sure you subscribe. Every Friday morning, we'll be releasing our latest on what's happening in politics, what's going to be happening. I can't think of it, but we've been doing these as a phone call for years now, and I just think of all the times where we said X is going to happen, and months later it happens, and we're like, look, we predicted it. Now you're going to get access to that level of analysis. This is a pretty cool thing. So thanks for listening. Thanks for watching. We can't wait till next week. We'll talk to you again.